Well, welcome back. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the tariff wars. We need to ring a bell here because, oh my goodness, our chat groups have been lit up there's been nothing else. And this was really intelligently done over a weekend when the markets at least have been closed, but futures are going to get absolutely lit. But there's a lot of kind of undertone conversations going on. What's the reality of this? I think is going to be relatively intriguing as we speculate on tonight's show. We're going to talk about what I think is actually going to be the detriment, the actual crash that has not. I don't think it's going to come because of tariffs. I think there's an underlying thing happening in the U.S. economy right now that is still largely under discussed, but it's going to lead to some fascinating outcomes in the future as well, which we'll get toward the latter half of this stream. But we'll talk about, first and foremost, what Trump said over the last day. We're going to talk about kind of the impacts that's having so far. We'll get a little comedy, a little humor. There's a lot of hilarity coming out of this as well. We'll lighten the mood a little bit to try not to be pure nationalists and, become absolutely bonkers because of it. Let's try and remain a little bit relaxed here. Cash is king. That's going to be a conversation toward the end of this video. Stick around. I promise you this cash conversation gets super intriguing and a lot more convoluted than most people would think. But let's kick it off with the three tweets here that I thought were most impactful and most intriguing. Because today I've implemented a 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada. I suck at the Trump impersonation, so we're going to probably end it there. But and a 10% additional tariff on China. This was done through the International Emergency Economic Power Act, which can only last, I think, for 100 days or something. And then they have to redo it or something. I don't know. I'll come back to some points around this later. But because of the major threat of illegal aliens and deadly drugs killing our citizens, including fentanyl, we need to protect Americans, and it's my duty as president to ensure the safety of all. I made a promise on my campaign to stop the flood of illegal aliens and drugs from pouring in across her. And Canada honestly doesn't have as much of an impact on this, which again is why I don't think this is anything a little bit beyond maybe negotiation tactics, because everyone's like, well, if it has to do with the border, Canada barely exports 1%, I guess, of illegal fentanyl into the United States. And meanwhile, so many drugs and illegal guns come up through your border more than it does technically our border. But again, conversation for another day, because obviously he flip-flops and then the opinion starts to change, right? First, it's about the drugs and the border. Now it says we pay hundreds of billions of dollars to subsidize Canada. Why? There is no reason. We don't need anything they have. But we have unlimited energy, should make our own cars, and have more lumber than we could ever use. Without this massive subsidy, Canada ceases to exist as a viable country. Harsh but true. Therefore, Canada should become our cherished 51st state. And much lower taxes and far better military protection, blah, blah, blah. Honestly, debatable. I think the tax thing is kind of funny because there's a lot of debates to this depending on where you live in the States. But nonetheless, I think this is also kind of hilarious because now we go from border discussions to, oh, we actually just want to own you. Just like we wanted to own Greenland, just like we wanted to take back the Panama Canal. Oh, your people love it. I love that their whole campaign, they go out and they're just like, oh, we've heard they would love it. They don't like being in the way they are now. They want to be part of us. That seems to always be their negotiating tactic, even though it's complete and utter obliterate nonsense. I mean, let's be real. You just can't be we want this back. And they know they want to be a part of us. It's so weird. And it's so Putin-esque, but it's how can we do this to negotiate better? And I feel like that's what it's kind of come down to, because now negotiation tactics are about to get real, right? This is where things get real and intriguing. Anybody that's against tariffs, including the fake news Wall Street Journal and hedge funds, is only against them because those people or entities are controlled by China, or the other foreign or domestic companies. Anybody that loves and believes in the United States of America is in favor of tariffs. I highly doubt that. They should have never ended in favor of income tax system in 1913. Well, they ended because of the Great Depression. The response to tariffs has been fantastic. Dare I say, the most fantastic. If there ever was fantastic, it's this kind of fantastic, right? And like I said, this all just seems kind of hilarious because, he's kind of battering against the hedge funds because they're betting billions against the market over the weekend, because people know what happens when tariff wars begin. It's literally the start of economic collapse for the most part. We'll see how it pans out, because I honestly don't think this is any more than negotiation tactics still. I mean, we're seeing futures absolutely get obliterated here. And I told you guys, when it comes to these kind of market conditions, you got to be a little careful. We'll get into it from the Canadian perspective if you own U.S. stocks, because our dollar got absolutely devastated leading into this. As soon as the dollar Forex trading opened, dollar dropped 1.5 points, I believe. So the conversion values are getting wild. But still, if you take a look, the U.S. tech Qs are probably, the U.S. NASDAQ Tech 100 down 2.44%. S&P's down almost 2%. TSX got hit about 1.06%. Obviously, these numbers I think are going to get more fantastically volatile as the market opens. But again, I do want to point out that, Trudeau's meeting with Trump on Monday, and something tells me that they're going to try and find some kind of new trade agreement. I mean, that's the whole point here. I mean, they did the same thing with Colombia, which alleviated some of my stress because it really seemed like they were doing the same thing that we're doing with them now. Trump's like, oh, we're going to do tariffs. And if you do tariffs, we're going to punish you with more tariffs. And Canada's like, well, we don't care. Like, it's honestly like out of a cartoon almost what's going on right now. But I'm presuming that it has nothing more to do than with negotiation tactics. Because if it doesn't, and I promise you, if it doesn't, what's going to happen in the coming months is going to be so far more severe than this little bit of volatility we're experiencing now. I mean, it's going to be a shit show, and it already is. Let's be real. I mean, if you have family, friends, the nationalism that's coming out, which we'll get to in a moment, which I absolutely hate. A lot of weird stuff. We'll listen to a few videos here. We'll try to get into some humor behind this as well.
It will be the 25% tariff across the board on all goods, 10% on oil and gas. This will come into force on Tuesday, is what was communicated to the government of Canada from top officials. There was also a warning that if Canada retaliates, the tariffs will increase. So there is a preemptive strike, or at least in terms of a message to the Canadian government, that if it retaliates with the targeted tariffs that it has been planning to, then the percentages will go up.
Like, what do you expect us to do? Just sit here and like raw dog take that? No, obviously, like the tariff wars are on, baby. We'll hit back. Like, I mean, what else are you gonna do? Obviously, we don't have the same kind of like bending arm power over here, but like, you really just be like, oh yeah, have Canada. We have one of the largest oil reserves on the planet, and like the top 3 largest oil reserves. And let's be real, the U.S. owns most of Canada anyways. Like, we don't own Tim Hortons anymore. Canada's Wonderland's owned by the U.S. Most U.S. companies, like our economies are so integrated, it's ridiculous. Right. So this is why I don't like nationalism at all anymore, because like I hear it from my family, my friends. I kind of get indoctrinated into this, and it's a super unhealthy way of thinking, in my opinion. But this is what our elected officials are forcing us to do. Right. I mean, take a listen.
And now is also the time to choose Canada. There are many ways for you to do your part. It might mean checking the labels at the supermarket and picking Canadian-made products. It might mean opting for Canadian rye over Kentucky bourbon, or foregoing Florida orange juice altogether. It might mean changing your summer vacation plans to stay here in Canada and explore the many national and provincial parks, historical sites, and tourist destinations our great country has to offer.
So the reason I don't like this way of thinking is because it can be weaponized very easily. Like, for example, let's say this trade war persists and Canada's forced to look at other trade partners. Like, we might even have to break our trade deals we have with the United States, because it would just absolutely decimate our economy, right? So at the end of the day, like, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to probably open up to more China trade deals. Like, China's already sliding into our DMs, baby. And then what ends up happening is, because Trump causes so much division amongst other countries, that basically they start standing up and they slap back and they get together and they say, you know what, forget this. Like, we're not going to include the US. We're going to start doing our own deals. The US starts losing certain, global manufacturing. Maybe they start sanctioning some of Apple's products. You like, who the hell actually knows, right? But then what's going to happen is you can stand up, and Trump could easily just say, hey, all these countries are coming against us now. Like, it's an us versus them. Like, what do? They're coming at us. They're the problem now, right? And then you get this kind of notion of nationalism where it starts with this little incremental, like, just don't buy a US product. Or if you're in the US, like, screw Canada. We don't need to buy their stupid products or whatever. Or, let's not travel to the US anymore. We're just going to travel to Mexico. Like, it just becomes like weaponizing almost. And I don't like the path it leads us down, because I'm a kind of like, I like the idea of globalizing. I really like where the world was headed. A lot of foreign places have been really changing their laws because of so much tourism, the openness of travel, the affordability of travel. Like, I won't get too much down the political landscape of it, but maybe we'll get into some of the humor. I'll get your guys' opinions on it in a moment, because obviously I think this is insane, and I think it's highly divisive what Trump is doing, but I get it. I can see it from a point of negotiation. If it is not a point of negotiation and he really seems to think tariffs actually are going to work, you guys, we're all screwed. I'm sorry, but we're all doomed. But again, you get to the point now where, like, at all these sporting events, there's been like, I think 3 sporting events now where they've been booing the national anthem in the US. Oh, yes. Everyone's loving the tariffs over here. I'm like, this is the best, though. By far, one of the best videos I found on TikTok so far today. This one really had me gutting.
N-D-N-D-E-I.
Hey,
Well, if it isn't America's hat.
okay.
Are you okay? Why, don't I look great again?
You look like Heat Miser on a bender.
I'll tariff the shit out of you.
You can't just
Make America hate again? Just did.
No, you.
Boom, tariff.
That's not how this.
Tariff 2 times.
Wow.
Bubo tarifo.
What if we pay for the wall?
Ooh, untariff.
Anything to keep him out.
2 taco tariffs coming right up.
Yes, I'm out.
Wait. Want to be the 51st state?
No.
Tariff. Hey, Gulf of America.
I'm not the.
Just leave it. Hey, do you know how much Greenland costs? Maybe we'll just build our own wall. Wait, come on. I love you guys. My heart goes out.
I love that ending so much, bro. Some of this shit is just raw gold. I haven't heard this in a while either. Like,
Chief, mate, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky.
Pinky.
Try to take over the world.
All right, before I get flagged for that, let's move on to the next one here. This was also really good, like the Ferris Bueller. I don't know if you guys saw this, but I've been seeing a bunch of clips circulating that are just quite hilarious.
You showed this video to Donald Trump? Anybody?
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the the Great Depression, passed the the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
Right? Like, because again, tariffs, the end consumer ends up paying for it at the end of the day, right? And some of these companies have absolutely no leeway at all. We were talking about this in our chat group, right? Like, you look at a company like Toyota, a lot of these auto companies, because almost the vast majority of major auto parts are coming from Canada and and Mexico into the United States. And when you look at the margins of a lot of these companies, when you put a 25% tariff on that, there's no margin anymore, right? So they have to severely reconsider, like, what's the most appropriate way of doing this to not completely devastate consumer spending, because obviously consumers are going to look for whatever the cheapest products possible are going to be, especially if they jack something up 25% or a huge amount to even continue to squeeze out any margin. Like, I mean, this is going to be truly detrimental, right? And this one was also funny. I found this hilarious.
You are now proposing tariffs against the United States' 3 biggest trading partners. Economists of all stripes say that ultimately consumers pay the price of tariffs.
I don't believe
Can
it.
you guarantee American families won't pay more?
I can't guarantee anything.
Of course not. Who the hell could? And I'm going to get down into a little bit more of the nitty-gritty facts and just some of the more intriguing things in a moment here and talk about the real market crash. But I'd love to kind of see what you guys are kind of perspectivizing down in the comment section there. I stand with Canada by eating Canadian banking until tariffs are removed. How much has your stock portfolio gone up in CAD since the dollar is so bad? This is, we'll get to this in a little bit because I really want to talk about what's going on with the dollar and the converting value. But yeah, I mean, even though the US markets are down, I think we're making up the difference just in the US dollar conversion, which as a foreign investor, I think, again, there's some really crazy underlying stuff happening globally with the US dollar that's just unbelievable. Cut off USA 100%. Yeah, unfortunately, good thing I'm not in politics, because I'd be a guy that'd be like, fucking just rip up the trade agreement. Like, forget just selling oil to the US. Like, forget this. Just rip it up. We're done. And just go start siding with other countries, giving them the cheaper oil instead of the United States, and just see what happens. I'd clap back. I wouldn't put up with any bullshit. I'd be like, fuck it. We're small, but we got commodities, baby. It's time to bring it home. Let's bring it home. But again, I don't like doing that either, because I love traveling. I love the United States. I love traveling everywhere. I like seeing how other countries functions, for better, for worse. Not everywhere is perfect, but it is what it is, right? So I do not want to, I want to keep that Canadian globalized mindset and not get too nationalistic about everything. But I get it. And it bothers me that I'm seeing it everywhere. Like, there's really going to start being like rivalry in the comment section of every Canadian US video moving forward, until every company moves to the USA. Back in the 80s, everything was a union made with pride in the USA. Unions are gone, right? That's a day that passed. To fix 25% tariffs in 24 hours, cut the power, natural gas. Yeah, to some extent, this comes back to the integration of something like, say, an Enbridge, or these natural pipe or these gas pipeline companies that are like so integrated from here all the way down to Texas. And again, the US has such huge ownership stake in all this stuff too, which is again why it makes absolutely no obliterate sense. Again, anybody with like any foresight knows that like what's going on here is and it comes back to maybe everyone wants to say the art of the deal, or maybe Trump's like not completely moronic. I'm not sure what's going on here, but like every economist, every bank is saying like all the numbers Trump is throwing out don't exist. Like with respect to Trump's assertion of the U.S. subsidized Canada to the tune of $200 billion per year, it's unclear where this number is derived from. In any event, rather than subsidy, the U.S. trade deficit is byproduct of the U.S. economic outperformance relative to other countries. And when they run the math, like Canada is by far like the smallest portion of any trade deficit in the United States. And again, we're selling those trade deficit products. For those that don't know what a trade deficit is, just basically if a country is importing more to a country than they're selling. And essentially, like you read through all these economic reports, and Canada, like in 2024 was only apparently like what, a $40 billion trade deficit or something like that, and is of the smallest of all the U.S. trade partners, even though we're one of the largest trade partners, and it probably doesn't even all get accounted for considering the amount of traveling between borders. I mean, you got to think about the amount of snowbird spending a lot of people I know are in the United States right now. So very intriguing from that aspect of the things as well, right? So my portfolio finished the week at 2.62%. Coming out of this week and the next week, again, when we take a look at where the markets finished, because I was slightly underperforming the S&P, which was up 2.95% to finish the year to date. Sorry, this is year to date, not this week. But yeah, year to date, I'm up 2.62%, and the S&P is up about 2.95%. But obviously, if we take a look at futures here again, which are bouncing around like wildfire, the US SP 500 here, the US 500 is down almost 2%. So we're wiping out most of the gains for the year. But where things get really intriguing is the CAD dollar is also down about 1.4%. So on the conversion, I am really not going to be down that much, which is kind of crazy to think, because it's like, oh, the US and Canadian markets are going down, but somehow the converted dollar value is continuing to rise for where I live. If I decide to, again, liquidate, the wife and I have 80% of our money in the United States dollar. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is the United States dollar remaining so strong on the back of concerning tariffs, which are going to lead to higher inflation, which are going to lead to what? What happens when inflation stays high, folks? Oh, that's right. Interest rates can't come down. All the interest rate reports that we've been hearing so graciously from Jerome Powell, the money printing man himself, that is going to change the entire outcome of what interest rate cuts are going to look like. And you might be thinking to yourself, this all sounds bad. This sounds terrible. Like something horrific has got to happen. Another recession in the United States. Oh my, well, this really only going to affect the poor. If you're broke in America, get out. Trump doesn't want broke people. We already cut off your Medicaid and all that crap. Yeah, you don't want to be broke in America. This is a rich man's game now. But what's happening and what's most intriguing is that the U.S. has already had a massive, massive control over inflation. I mean, inflation would have been so much worse if it wasn't for the power of the US dollar and foreign imports. If I lived in the United States right now, the one thing that I would be doing is opening my mind to foreign investments. I mean, yeah, obviously in the US, if you live in a bubble and you just think that's all there is to the world and you look around and you're like, prices are going up, this sucks. But if you took your money anywhere else in the world, even to Canada right now, like your spending power is so disgustingly unbelievable that like you could be buying companies like 30, 40 cents on the dollar right now, just in the dollar converted value. And it's kind of intriguing, right? Because I mean, if you take a look, even on this news, the US dollar pumped up 1.27%. And I have a suspicion to believe the reason for this is because right now we have a global currency collapse going on. Most countries, all countries, as far as I can tell, are seeing their dollar deflate against the United States dollar. And this has a lot to do with people taking their money out of their country's dollar because it's been deflating, putting it in US treasuries where it's highly safe, and they're seeing a double-edged return, right? If you live in the US and you're just buying a 4% treasury, whatever, you don't think much of it. But if you live in any other country right now, you're not just getting a 4% return, you're likely getting a double-digit return. As a Canadian, if I were to put my money in a US treasury over the last year, not only have I probably seen a 4 or 5% return, but I saw an extra 8% just on the currency conversion. So when I sell that treasury, convert it back to Canadian dollars, not only did I make 4 or 5% whenever I locked that number in, I'm now getting an extra 8%. So I'm making double-digit returns on one of the safest investments you could possibly buy, backed by one of the most powerful country in the world. So like you can understand why every country right now is probably like, if you're an investor, if you're a hedge fund manager, whatever, you recognize this is a trend that has been going on now for quite some time. And it's likely a trend that seems to be continuing. So people are flooding into these safe assets. We see it in retail money market funds right now. Look at the growth in retail money market funds. It is disgusting. Like this chart is going absolutely parabolic as people flood with all the fear of tariffs and volatility, what's going to happen to their retirement, what's going to happen to their spending, inflation. There's so much uncertainty tomorrow that people are just flooding into cash. Even though we're sitting at like record level S&P numbers, you have to recognize that there's something boiling underneath this, and it has not a lot to do with just US capital. It is global capital. When you take a look now, we're at 6.8 trillion in US money market funds, hitting another damn record for last updated December 12th. This thing just continues to go absolutely paramount. And what people are getting kind of convoluted with, or I think confused by, especially like Tom Lee, and I hear this a lot, where they think that this money will naturally flow out of money market funds and into equities. That's not what's going to happen. There is a very specific reason that this money's here, and it is not money that is dedicated toward equities. And what will happen, and what I believe could potentially trigger a massive correction or crash in the markets, is if the United States starts cutting interest rates aggressively on the back of such volatile fear, or if we start seeing global recovery in currencies. And none of those things, I don't know what a timeline looks like for any of that. But if the U.S. brought its interest rates down to more parity with what's going on with global interest rates, like our Canadian interest rates at 3%, right? It's hardly worth investing in money market funds here, or GICs or bonds or whatever. So my real concern is that once things level off and it starts becoming unadvantageous to be having U.S. money market funds and currencies start to recover, those returns are going to start weakening, which means people will start pulling that money out in droves and taking it back to their own country, probably causing further recovery in other currencies around the world. Like I said, if you zoom out and you actually look at all the currencies and you look at what's going on here, it is such a fascinating case study, because realistically, US inflation would probably be substantially higher if it wasn't for the entire world flooding into the United States dollar, making it the most powerful currency, unlike even the US dollar seen in over the last 20 years, right? So, I mean, there is some crazy economic event unfolding in front of our eyes right now, and it's wild. I mean, it is just wild, right? Like, I'd obviously get slaughtered right now if the US dollar collapsed in any material way. I mean, people don't think buying like a US centric investment is a concentrated investment that can lead to wicked volatility if any of these weird, very fine line functioning, like this global economic machine, changes or shifts in any material way. And you can see massive differences in returns, right? We've just been on this trajectory that we've kind of gotten a little bit too comfortable with. And now I'm a guy that doesn't care. I'm fully invested all the time, but this is why I always recommend like XEQT, global money market or global market funds. Figure out what your risk tolerance is for something like this. If you're in retirement or not in retirement, are you comfortable riding this? If not, you should put a percentage into perhaps money market funds or more stable investments that don't have as much volatility. These conversations are conversations we've been having all day in our chat group, which if you want to be a part of, go to kylevingson.com, links in the description below, blah, 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 blah. But it's been really intriguing just having these real world discussions with people in retirement and people that are just like you and me, that I don't care. Do you think I care if this drops, if it collapses? I'm 33 years old. If it all could go to zero tomorrow, yeah, well, whatever, life goes on. I mean, it would suck if it goes to zero. We'd probably be in a Great Depression, dare I say a world war, and life's probably not worth living anymore anyways. But if it does collapse to any material extent, like, I'm just going to buy more. If I lose my job, I'm going to find another job. I'll find a way to hustle. I'll keep it alive. I mean, you know, that's what's gotten me to where I am now. Every time these major catastrophic events hit the market, all you can do is buy. Just keep buying, baby. Keep working, keep buying, keep cost averaging. I'm not a guy that's going to liquidate. I'm going to stand strong. I did it through 2022, man. I put it all in the S&P. We rode her down, bought heavily on the dips, and rode her all the way back up. That's how we got us to the seven-figure mark. But we'll see if we can hold the seven-figure mark going through 2025. I'm out of all CAD. Yeah. You know, it'd probably be more intelligent, but again, you don't know, right? Because again, I think when the interest rates start to materially come down, which they shouldn't, the U.S. is smart, and I think the Federal Reserve knows what they're doing with this. They need to leave them elevated. If anything, in perpetuity, leave them elevated. It's the only thing that's maintaining the superpower of the U.S. dollar. But yeah, we always just keep a little bit, because I do like the Canadian economy. I like having some global diversification, and I think Canadian companies are strong, but that weakening dollar is tough. It is what it is. It's, again, 20%. We keep it fairly small. And if you look at money like global ETFs like XEQT or whatever, like, you know, even the Canadian foreign stocks are still fairly mitigated the same way we're kind of doing it to some extent. But I'm going to buy EU stocks now. Yeah, I mean, there's some potential there with there's a lot of EU stocks that are down. Isn't Nestle an EU stock? Like, what happened to Nestle? I mean, with cocoa prices collapsing and all that stuff, I mean, what's going on with Nestle stock right now? I mean, it's crazy. This is like one of the biggest food companies on the planet. And look at this drop. I mean, I think it's down 39%, you know, with almost a 4% yield. But I think a lot of this has to do with commodity prices, right? Like, what is cocoa prices doing? cocoa price chart. Yeah, I mean, all of these crazy commodity prices are mitigated by the power of the US dollar. So when they're importing this stuff, it's much cheaper, right? Yeah, even cocoa is still trading at just parabolic highs because of, I don't know, global effects with weather and all that stuff, which is super interesting. Yeah, but there's a lot of opportunity right now. I'm telling you that. This is the problem, right? It's hard to stay in cash because unlike Warren Buffett, I'm young, I'm nimble, I don't have $300 billion to spend. So when I got a couple G's, where can I throw it? There's always an opportunity somewhere, and I'm looking for it. You know, I'm hoping the telecom giants are a little bit cushioned from this, because we all know that a lot of people are trying to figure out what companies are not going to get, you know, blown away by these tariffs. And I think some of the telecom giants could be a little bit cushioned. So we'll find out, won't we? Should be interesting to see what stocks get absolutely clobbered and what ones don't. Yeah, crypto too, right? Crypto is getting killed right now. I mean, yeah. Let's take a look at what Bitcoin's doing. I didn't bring that up. I should have, because, you know, people have been using Bitcoin as kind of a factor to this. And yeah, Bitcoin's down to 94,000. And that's just kind of over the, I mean, literally over the last week, right? It kind of plummeted 8% so far. Still going down too. It's hard finding a bottom right now. But again, I think this, again, if what I think is true, and this is just purely negotiation, these are going to be buying opportunities. These are going to be great cost averaging opportunities. So do keep that in mind. And I love that Bitcoin is a really good indicator to what the market's doing, because the reality is people think Bitcoin is some safe haven against the dollar and collapsing this and that, but it's not, right? As soon as people get a little bit skittish, it's a speculative asset, and people immediately start selling it out of fear that people are going to get out of Bitcoin, which doesn't make sense, because it should be a non-correlated asset, but clearly it's completely correlated. But again, I have nothing against Bitcoin. I own a little bit. It's too speculative for my nature to make it a huge position, but it is a good indicator to what people are feeling. And people are feeling like they want to get the fuck out. So we'll see who panic sells tomorrow. But anyways, kind of moving on. Panic sell Google? Hell no. I'm agnostic, man. I don't care what governments do. I believe there's great companies out there all the time, and Google will remain a great company. These are all great companies. They're globalized companies. So I refuse to invest based off what governments are doing. Will I ride some volatility? Will I get some pain because of it? Probably. Will I get some dip buying opportunities? Probably. So I'm not going to let it ruin my life. Pornhub ban, get him for sure. Give him 15 minutes to cancel tariffs. It's funny as hell. No shipping oil. It's no proper pipelines to the coast, especially the East Coast. Canada is 20 years late to the billions. So yeah, kind of. Canada's been a very mismanaged country because we have so many commodities and we have too many trade deals with the United States. I don't think Trump is negotiating. I think he's just dumb. Yeah, I don't know. That's the question, isn't it? Everyone's just sitting here you're either a MAGA idiot and you really believe the shit he says, or you're one of these economists where you're sitting here nerding out probably just ADHDing it, OCDing it, just taking some pills to deal with it over the weekend. And you're like, none of this makes any sense. What do I do? I'm so confused. Everybody knows that. That's what I'm saying. It's the whole thing is confuse the shit out of everybody and then negotiate a deal because everyone's on edge, right? Isn't that the point? Am I wrong? I mean, I'm presuming that's what he's doing. It has to be what he's doing, right? I mean, this is like a child having a fight with your brother in the other bunk bed. I love the memes. I was sharing so many memes, I love the Western memes where everyone's just panning to their eyes and they're all holding their guns who's going to move first? Canada should flood the market with cheap no-name drugs. Oh God, Toronto booed Star Spangled. I mean, we're seeing all of that, right? Shared some of that already. Let's get to the more recent comments and we'll finish up here. I'm buying XQT as soon as the market opens. Yeah. This is what could really happen. On Monday, they could get a deal. Tariffs could be alleviated. Again, look at Amazon, right? Amazon, 60% of their products come from China. I mean, you got to understand, companies, if this gets to pan out, you're going to see a crazy impact at a multi-$100 billion level. $1 trillion level is going to get impacted. And, Trump it's not going to hit the bottom line of your wallet. Of course it is, right? Everybody knows that you're going to pay it. Look at all these e-commerce companies that are literally buying shit on Alibaba to sell it in an Amazon warehouse. It's just absolutely hilarious. Alimentation Kushtar. What's really funny, and just as anecdotally, we were just walking with my brother's kids, taking them for a walk on the weekend. And, my wife's Muslim, but if you guys know, Muslim culture, Indian, whatever, and there's something called Mecca. And my my nephew always calls Max Mecca. We got ourselves because I don't know where he got the term from, but he's like, I want to go to Mecca. And then we take him to the dollar store instead because Max is disgustingly overpriced, which is a part of the alimentation cushtard, right? I always have a hard time because the company's done so well, but their price gouging is insane. What do you think of the new harvest? I got to take a look. No fees till 2026 on blue chip stocks. Yeah, I noticed a lot of Canadian ETFs are just spawning out of nowhere to try and like get everyone's new money. There's a lot of weird ETFs coming out that are like unnecessary, like a telecom ETF that holds 3 stocks. They're coming out with so much, cutting fees, really trying to drive in some volume. Which is really interesting. I've tried to get a sponsor out of them. I've been emailing them to be like, sponsor me. I talk about your ETFs already. You should be paying me. What are you buying this week, Kyle? I got some money aside, of course. I've been looking. I'm just not sure. We'll see. Like if the market's only going to drop a couple percentage points, it's not going to get me excited. I mean, I bought some US stocks. I told you guys last week, I went pretty aggressive, just converting money, buying a bit more Google in the upcoming earnings and just being aware that if tariffs play out, it's likely the Canadian dollar would drop more, and it did. So we were right about a few things. So it's kind of tampering any of the volatility with the dollar conversion. However, I want to see some real material impact, man. I don't want to see a measly 2% drop. Fuck that. I want to see like a good 10%, 15%. That's when I'll be like, okay, now we're getting the ball rolling here. But I think we'll see. We have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow. I love these streams. Very funny and informative. I appreciate that greatly. Thanks for sticking around. Kyle rocks. Love it when he swears, lol. Yeah, and I'm trying not to get too politically divisive. Sometimes, like on my last stream, I removed it because it just got too politically. I feel dirty. Like, you ever just feel dirty when you get too involved? Like, especially with people that are like, I don't want to say racist, but they just have like perspectives on other people in the world. And I don't know. I end up feeling dirty about it. And I don't want like to throw shame to anybody. So I deleted the stream. Didn't delete it. I unlisted it. A lot of people already watched it, but it wasn't even that bad. I hate it. I hate feeling dirty about shit, when it comes to politics. Same about Dogecoin. Like, I mean, let's talk about who made the real bag here. The real bag, was the, let's take a look here at how the Donald Trump coin is doing. That's where the real bag was made. What a smart move here. Yeah, I mean, oh my God, down to $17. My God, man. Trump hopefully walked away with the bag and just destroyed retail on this one. Look at that, man. The market cap. Look at where we're at. Look at the destruction of this. I mean, CoffeeZilla was right. Like this, this was insane. I mean, this was probably one of the most insane things a president's ever done, in my opinion, because it's pure like level of grift. And just to see that pump to $70 and now we're down to 17, and that huge drop just came in the last day or two, like a massive plummet from 27 all the way down to where we are. That's just like, again, it shows you how people feel about what's going on right now. And if this is what people are voting with their dollars, like, internally, it's not like no one's really supporting. I can't imagine there's a ton of people behind Trump being like, yay, tariffs. This is amazing. Like, nobody's saying that. I'm sorry. How long, if you had to guess, will this trade war last? Maybe a week. If it lasts longer than a week, I'm sorry, but we're fucked. I think it's just a negotiation tactic like it was with Colombia. Colombia did the same thing. Oh, we're going to raise it by 50 then, and blah, blah, blah. And then, the U.S. got what they wanted. They cut. Canada's not going to become the 51st state, but they'll likely probably come to some new settlement on whatever. I don't know if it actually has anything to do with the border. I'm not in Trump's head. I don't know what's going on or what his buddies are all thinking around this. So we'll find out. It's going to be entertainment. I'm definitely, smoking a J, trying to take it easy here, and we'll watch it all unfold. We'll have a Canadian beverage because you won't be able to buy U.S. whiskey anymore. It's like, I'm doing my best to alleviate the severity. I do not want to become a nationalist. It's going to be a little bit of a nationalist, but I don't want to be extreme. What are the safe haven cybersecurity utilities? I don't know what would be a safe haven stock in this. Probably things that are, again, this comes back to probably waste management companies, things that don't have too much cross-border trade that are like railways. Like, again, this is what I keep saying about Enbridge. I have a hard time believing Enbridge or some of these energy companies will be actually that hardly impacted. They might have speculative risk that brings them down, but realistically, it doesn't matter what you're paying for the oil. It still has to go through the pipelines. So at the end of the day, it's like, this is why you can't get crazy about your portfolio, because a lot of the companies you hold are going to be agnostic to what's going on. This is why I love social media. This is why I love Facebook. I love TikTok. I love owning Google. This is why Google and Meta make up the 2 largest positions in our accounts, because media attention is fucking just printing. You know how disgusting it is for media companies right now? We're all just glued to our screen on a weekend, not enjoying ourselves at all. Like, this is my whole day. Me and my wife are like, holy shit, this is like happening on a weekend. Like, what's happening here? And just social media is consuming us all. It's printed, man. God, I love social media. It's the greatest business of the 21st century. Google should be the largest company on the planet. I don't know why it's not. I'm looking into holding gold. I think either way, if Bitcoin goes under, oddly enough, maybe I'll just pull up some commodities quick, because I'm surprised, and I don't know if it's just because of the US dollar or something that's going on with just like people moving money around, but gold and silver have been tanking on this news. Let's take a quick look here. I find this like highly peculiar as well. Let's show me the charts here. Let's see the gold price first. Yeah, I mean, gold just opened trading, right? And it's already starting to go down. Silver took a pretty big little jump to the downside here. I mean, it peaked last week at 31.66, and we're already down to 30. So I'm not sure what's causing the commodity fluff, but very, very interesting. Don't forget the miners, cause they are cheap. Yeah, I mean, I like the miners over the physical gold, but to each their own. I do have some precious metals. She's sitting right here. I got some cool precious metals back there. What else is going on? I love it when people freak out. Yeah, I mean, what else are you going to do, right? There's not much else to do. So I'm just hoping it doesn't get to any real severity, or it's going to be a absolute shit show. But on that note, folks, I don't want to ramble on, but maybe we'll answer a few more questions. I can't get over this 355 of you here that have bored on a weekend, man. I appreciate you showing up, though. I love y'all. I love y'all. Do the companies pay for the tariffs? No, we will pay for the tariffs. Yes, companies will have to pay for them initially, but it's super simple. The irony of this is people are like overcomplicating it. The US is just tired that they import more than they export to their trade partners. It's usually not healthy for a country to have a trade deficit, because it means that they are sending more to another country than they are bringing in, right? So they just simply say, hey, we don't feel like we're getting our fair share of this. More people in our country should be focusing on local oil, local businesses, local manufacturing. So they say, hey, what we're going to do is we're going to tariff Canada. And that way, when those companies in the US have to bring those parts over, the US automakers, Toyota, Ford, almost all Ford motors are getting built in Canada. When they bring them over, they're going to have to pay 25%, which makes the company say, hey, I can't afford that extra 25%. Our margins aren't high enough. So we're going to have to pass it on to the end consumer while we figure out how to make manufacturing cheaper. But the double-edged sword to this and the moronicness of it is capitalism is greedy. And if somebody like Ford isn't going to be able to manufacture it that much cheaper in the United States, let's say, because of the dollar conversion, for example, and competitors start to come up, competitors aren't going to lower their prices. They're going to be like, oh, this guy has to charge 25% more. We might as well charge it just 24%. If it's 1 or 2% cheaper, they'll still come to us. This is why trade wars are completely ineffective, because people will still price gouge. They will take advantage of the upper pricing, right? Like, it's the same thing with like insurance companies. Like, you look at doctors in the US and stuff, right? Like, if I can get a maximum premium from an insurance company, why wouldn't I? Like, why would I give you a deal on something if I know I can get the maximum dollar out of you? This is where trade wars don't make sense. And that's why they aren't practical. That's why I don't think Trump is serious, because he's a businessman and we know how business works. That is how business works. If I have to pay more just because a competitor comes in doesn't mean they're going to charge less for it. And that's the same thing with oil too. Drill, baby, drill. Let's bring down prices. Doesn't make any fucking sense either. It's like, do you ever talk to people that run mega oil companies? They need oil at a certain price for it to be economical. If you make oil too cheap, no one's going to drill it. So oil has to stay at this very, it's the Goldilocks zone. The entire global economy functions in the Goldilocks zone. You flick one string in the wrong direction, and the whole thing just goes bananas. It's wild, man. Trump's given us a real case study here. Why are Canadian oil stocks going to have a bad year? Because, well, again, it's convoluted, but they have to ship to the United States. And if they can produce it for less in the United States, and they can buy it from Canada, and Trump starts giving tax breaks to those trying to, again, this is the hilarity of it. They'll get a tax break to sell it in the US, but they're not going to sell it for the same price that, is going to be cheaper. They'll sell it for 5% less. And it's just, again, the convoluted nature starts to unfold. But that's the whole point, right? So oil, because the US will start probably taking less of our oil. I don't know. We'll find out. Trump is a terrible businessman. I don't give him more credit than he's due. I'm trying to. I want to give him more credit because he's the president of the United States. And I am really hoping these are just negotiation tactics, because if they're not, you know what the U.S. will look like on a global scale. There was a quote that I heard, and it was funny, and I'm probably going to brutalize it, is that Trump is literally causing the greatest uniting of nations. It's just too bad the U.S. won't be a part of it. I mean, that's going to be the reality of it, right? USA treasuries are a no-brainer now. Yeah, that's what everyone's doing. That's what everyone's doing. How vulnerable is VDY? Should we be worried? Well, I'm not personally. I know it's going to get hit, but I'm not worried about it. You can't be worried about this shit. We'll go through it, man. It's just the wave. It's just the wave. We went through it in the pandemic. We went through it through 2022. I didn't get to visit 2008, but you know, you can't live without these cyclical insanity cycles. I mean, they just happen. You just got to deal with it. Bunker down, just be mitigated, be smart, and stay diligent. I doubt they are negotiating tactics. We'll see. Well, Monday's the meeting. We'll see what happens with Canada, at least, because they're getting together on Monday. So, and the tariffs are supposed to go in on Tuesday, right? So we'll see. Anyways, folks, let's hope not. I really, really hope not. I do not like divisive nationalism. Let's just kind of remember the entire world and culture is beautiful. I love Chinese people. I love the United States people, Mexican people. We're all trying to do our own thing, regardless of politics. We're all just trying to live. So stay cool. Stay awesome, folks. And as always, I look forward to catching you in the next one. Peace.